Gustavo was like a chief operator, and Pablo was the image, and he was the boss.
Pablo was the boss. He was the boss. He's the CEO. He's the boss. Everybody. Pablo gave orders, but Gustavo was the dirty guy. The guy who had the hands on the coke, hands on calling people. I mean, he had his own organization, but he's the one who gave the order. It's an interesting, it's an interesting relationship that both of these guys have. Yeah, there was a sign at a cocaine lab, and I cannot find the picture, but it said, "If I catch you using the product, I will kill you." That was a sign that he had at every lab. In other words, he didn't want his workers to be using cocaine, but wants the rest of the world to use it.
Salutare și bun găsit la un interviu în exclusivitate și în premieră pentru România cu legendarii agenți DEA, Steve Murphy și Javier Pena, cei care l-au urmărit și l-au doborât pe Pablo Escobar. Vom afla de la ei povești incredibile despre întreaga anchetă și despre momentele grele petrecute în acei ani. Vom vorbi și despre Netflix, pentru că ei sunt cei care au inspirat acest film de mare succes. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me. It was an honor and a pleasure to meet you a couple of years ago, and now I have the chance to be able to talk to you and to get into the real story of Pablo Escobar. Before you get into that, I want to ask you, what do you know about Romania?
I know.
Well, thank you, Bogdan. Appreciate you having us on the show here. Not a lot, other than Romania was one of the first countries to pick up our book, Manhunters.
Really?
Yep. Believe it or not, I think it was the second or third country. The guy that plays me in Narcos, Boyd Holbrook, the actor, he was also an actor in the trilogy with Kevin Costner. It's called Hatfields and McCoys, and he told us they filmed that in Romania. You guys are one of the Baltic states. You're on the Black Sea. Bucharest is your capital.
I mean, people will have the chance to see all over the interview the book. So it will be an advertisement with the book, and I encourage them to go and buy this book. It's an incredible book with your memories and your stories of what happened exactly in those years in Colombia. Now, I want to ask you, we all know Pablo Escobar, the way he was portrayed by media. We read articles about him. We watched videos. I want to ask you, who was Pablo Escobar the way you discovered him and not the way he was presented to you when you started the investigation?
Yeah, the investigation started in the mid-'80s, and I think you're referring to that Robin Hood, that people say Pablo Escobar was a Robin Hood. We can attest, Pablo Escobar was no Robin Hood. Pablo Escobar is an interesting character. He's a very deadly trafficker, very barbaric. However, he grew up in humble beginnings, grew up poor, and then all of a sudden, and him and his cousin, which a lot of people don't realize, Gustavo Gaviria, was really the Pablo was the CEO. Gustavo Gaviria had all the contacts. But anyway, Pablo Escobar, like you said, started 1-2 kilos at a time. Then before it was all over, Pablo Escobar was controlling 80% of the cocaine that was reaching the world. And like I said, we can talk a lot about how he got his wealth, but in essence, we tell people that Pablo Escobar got his wealth through killing and taking over the cocaine markets in the world. He stood in his way. He had you and everybody else killed. And if you, like I said, it's just a short history of Pablo Escobar, the way he attained that wealth that we really, talk about, and we mention it in the book. And and I know you had some questions earlier on the show, so we can.
I have a lot of questions, and I want to ask you, first of all, about that famous mugshot that we all know, and it's everywhere in media, of him smiling. Was that a pinpoint in showing ignorance to the Colombian government and power?
You know what? I'm glad you brought that up. Yes, if you look at his face, it's that mocking, that making fun, like, yeah, you arrested me, but you know what? Look at that smile. It's a great photograph. It's iconic. I think everybody in the world has seen it, but he's telling people, I'm going to be in jail. And, the real truth is he was in jail for about 2 or 3 minutes. He paid the bribe money. He was out. But it's that attitude, that cocky attitude that he's showing the rest of the world, the rest of Colombia, saying, you're not going to hold me in jail. I'm going to be out here in a couple of minutes. And he was. But it's an interesting photo. You are correct.
That's incredible, and that says a lot about his power and the way who Pablo Escobar was. In the early of 1980s, there were lots of drug cartels in Colombia, as anywhere else in South America, but his empire was huge. How was he able to build this empire, and what role the Gustavo Gaviria, his cousin, played in all of this?
Well, I'll answer the first part and let Javier answer the second part about Gustavo.
Right.
Pablo, his psyche was that he really doesn't have a conscience. He has no remorse. He had no problems employing violence to get what he wanted. If it required killing people, torturing people, dismembering people, that was all part of the business. He was okay with it. Either he could do it himself or he could order his henchmen to do that, his sicarios. We're talking about the world's first narco-terrorist. So people say, what is a narco-terrorist? Well, it's just basically a narcotics trafficker who employs terroristic activities in his criminal enterprise. So Pablo was the first narco-terrorist in the world. We all know that he developed a business model, and this might be attributed more to Gustavo than Pablo, but eventually he became responsible for 80% of the cocaine, first in the United States and then throughout the entire world. So, that money, that greed, that power, we believe it changed his mindset, so that if he had to kill somebody, we know for a fact that he personally killed one of the Moncada and Galeano brothers in his prison just before he escaped in 1992, I believe.
Right.
But Javier, if you want to talk about Gustavo.
Yeah, and Gustavo's an interesting character, and I always, mention he never got the credit that he deserved. Gustavo ran the business on the narcotics distribution, and when I talk about the distribution, they were dealing with the Mexicans at this time. A well-known fact, Amado Carrillo Fuentes, famous Mexican trafficker who's dead now. They were dealing with, a lot of people will remember General Noriega, right? Mm-hmm. In charge of Panama, the military forces in Panama, basically was a dictator. Noriega would give them safe passage. In other words, the loads would land in Panama. From Panama, it was a lot easier to smuggle them into the United States because they were almost home. The Caribbean countries, wow, a lot of loads came in through Haiti, Santo Domingo, Dominican Republic. And it was kind of weird because Gustavo Gaviria was always the one who was coordinating these shipments. Gustavo and Pablo were first cousins. They grew up together, and they were like brothers. They loved each other. They did everything together. Gustavo was the common sense. Sometimes we'd have to hold Pablo down and say, Pablo, are you crazy? There's a famous line, right, in the Narcos series where they're talking about the money laundering, and I think Pablo says, just launder the money like Al Capone did, right, or something. And Gustavo tells Pablo, Al Capone never had this much money, So that's kind of funny, but that's the relationship that both had.
So Gustavo was like a chief operator, and Pablo was the image, and he was the boss.
He was the boss. He was the boss. He's the CEO. He's the boss. Everybody. Pablo gave orders, but Gustavo was the dirty guy. The guy who had the hands on the coke, hands on calling people. I mean, he had his organization, but he's the one who gave the order. It's an interesting it's an interesting relationship that both of those guys had.
What do you know about Pablo spending time into his labs? I mean, did he actually go to those labs that we've seen in the jungles, or that was more like Gustavo?
That was other people. Pablo never went to the dirty side. I mean, he had him set up. he could have visited. I mean, we're not. I'm sure at one point but he stayed away from that because that's the dirty work of the cocaine business, the manufacturing. You're dealing with chemicals, you're dealing with processing plants, you're drying the cocaine, packaging it. It's dirty work. So yeah, he stayed away from that.
But tell him about that sign that you found, Javier.
Yeah, there was a sign at a cocaine lab, and I cannot find the picture, but it said, "If I catch you using the product, I will kill you." That was a sign that he had at every lab. In other words, he didn't want his workers to be using cocaine, but wants the rest of the world to use it.
Wow, that's incredible. I'll have to kill you. Wow. Tell me, when did you guys meet each other, and what was your first reaction when you were assigned for this job? Like, did you know who Pablo Escobar was? Like, was he that big in that time?
Well, there's a difference here. Javier reported to Colombia in 1988, and people ask us if we volunteered. Yes, we did. DEA doesn't assign you to go overseas. You have to volunteer to go overseas. So he came out of Austin, Texas, and really because he was so close to the border, the Mexican border, I don't think he had a lot of interaction or knowledge about Pablo. But when he got to Colombia, they told you, hey, this is your case. You're going to be working with this person. Well, 3 years later, I show up in 1991. I'd been in Miami for 4 years, knew very well who Pablo was. All of our cases were indirectly associated with Escobar, but never any to that level of where we can indict him. Other agents did have cases like that, but none of the cases in my office were like that. And when I went to Colombia, I didn't know Javier. I didn't know I was going to be assigned to the Escobar case. But when I got there, Javier had a partner named Gary Sheridan, who all three of us became very good friends. And then Gary got promoted and moved on. And that's when Javier and I really took over. And it's in our culture, in the law enforcement culture, when you go into a new office, there's kind of like a honeymoon period. Even though you're experienced investigators and agents, people don't know if they can trust you. What's your reputation? Are you a hard worker? Are you a slug? Or, what's your specialty and all that. So it's a little bit like a honeymoon, touchy-feely type time period where you get to know each other. But it wasn't any time at all that Javier and I got to be very close friends. That was in 1991. And here we are in 2020, and we're still best friends.
Law enforcement is about trusting your partners, and probably wasn't a hard period to get to know each other. And I think that was pretty smooth, right? Yeah,
once you develop that trust, and it's like everything, when you work with someone, how he's gonna, like I said, the strengths and the weaknesses, and we had strengths and weaknesses. For example, my weakness is I'm not organized. I have paperwork all over my desk, stuff like that, right? Steve is very organized and is a good writer, so we sort of matched, strengths and weaknesses, and so that helped us out. But once you develop, that trust, and we weren't doing anything, illegal, at the time that we were like, hey, we're going to jail. None of that stuff happened, and some of that stuff in the show is, dramatic licenses.
We'll get into Netflix and a Narcos story. I want to ask you, did you ever feel
you trust each other?
Yeah.
Did you ever feel in real danger? And I'm asking you this because, Steve, I know you brought your wife in Colombia for the whole duration of the investigation that you were in. Were you afraid that something may happen to you and your family? Because bombs and attacks were happening every day.
Well, I was, and I don't want to speak for Javier, but I'll tell you something that he probably will not tell you is before I got there, before I arrived in Colombia in 1991, the Medellin cartel found out where he lived on 2 different occasions, his apartment in Bogota. And he received phone calls where, now normally you would think that the United States would pack him up and send him back home, but all he did is gave him a new apartment. So he continued on his mission. So, I mean, that's the ultimate danger right there, that Pablo and his sicarios know where you live. For me, that first year was the first week I was in the embassy is the week that Pablo surrendered in 1991. So that next year, the bombing stopped. It was relatively a quiet year, but it gave me an opportunity to work with Javier, learn all about the Medellin cartel. And then in 92, when he escaped, the very next day is when Javier and I moved to Medellin. And for the next 18 months, we lived with the Colombian National Police. Now, that left my wife back in Bogota by herself. She doesn't speak Spanish, She learned some words. She was able to get along. But what we found is the Colombian people were some of the nicest people in the world. They're very accepting. If you go in with an attitude like the ugly American, they'll tell you real quick where the airport is and that you can get the heck out of their country. But if you go in and you're willing to accept their lifestyle and their culture and just get along and, use what Spanish you have and be willing to laugh at yourself some, she amazed me how she got along. And, in the show Narcos, it shows that she left me and went back to Miami. That's not true. She stayed in Colombia the entire time.
Wow. I want to ask Javier, because you mentioned they found your apartment. Were you afraid that you're actually going back home and you're not going to be able to work on this case? Because I know when you're assigned on a case, you get attached to it. You wanna solve this.
Right.
What happened?
And that is true. Usually, right now, I don't want to get into our safety. That's
okay.
But when I got a call, basically with my supervisor and said, "Hey, Javier, you need to leave your apartment. There's some guys en route to go come after you, basically looking to kill you." Mm-hmm. He said, "I'll explain later. Just get on your." We had Broncos, 4 Broncos at that time. So I gathered I got my gun, obviously. And I got out of there as soon as I could, went to the embassy. Once I got to the embassy, they were waiting for me. And it was, they had electronic information about that. So obviously I got moved to another apartment. But you know what? It never at that time crossed my mind that I would be sent back. But they just said, just basically be careful, look at your surroundings when you drive, so I just moved to another place. And you know what, the place I moved to was a beautiful place. It was in the city of Bogota. So that was kind of scary for me.
And from this story, I want to jump into Pablo Escobar put a price on your head. Let's say it like this. How did you feel about it? I mean, that everywhere you're going, somebody can see you and they can snitch out about it, and you're in danger.
Well, it's not a comfortable feeling, and it, when you first get there and you find out about this ransom on your head, it's a little disconcerting. But you just get so engrossed and involved in your work. And that's one thing about Javier and I we both have very, very strong work ethics. We have the ability to focus on a mission and see it through to a successful completion. And you just get caught up in your work, and it's just like anything else in life. You kind of get used to it and you kind of become complacent to it.
How did you find out that Pablo put this price for your capturing?
I found out from Javier.
It got intercepts. Obviously, we were doing a lot of electronic intercept on the telephone, so he knew who he was, and he mentioned the price, and so that's a little. But in when this happens, remember, and this was sort of a war with Pablo Escobar. So when we lived with the police. We called it the bloque de búsqueda, the search block, which was made up of. We had a uniform side, and I think we had 600 guys, Steve, on the uniform side, and then we had the non-uniform side, who we worked with, like the intelligence guys, the undercover guys. That was a specialized group of police officers. And let me just mention that at the beginning, we made the mistake where we were getting police officers from Medellin. And that was a big mistake because there were a couple of guys we found out later on were corrupt. But Pablo Escobar, being that savvy criminal he is, got to their families. Said, "Hey, mother, father, your son's at the search block. If I don't get a phone call that, warning me they're coming after me, I'm going to kill, everybody in the family. So certain police officers would call, Pablo Escobar, hey, we're coming, and he would leave. So later on, we changed that mentality. We brought in guys that were not from Medellin, which helped us out. And long story short, Steve and I worked with this guy's specialized group called DIJIN, DIJIN, and they were from Bogota. And they're like the intelligence guys. So Steve and I worked with them. They were good friends of ours. They trusted us. We trusted them. And, and there was a couple of those guys later on got killed by Pablo Escobar. So, something like that, your strength, your relationship strengthens. And there's a trust. So they were protecting us. We were protecting them. So it was, it was good.
What was the amount that they put on your head?
$300,000 US.
And that's probably close to $1 million in our days.
I've heard nowadays it's up close to 5 million, isn't it, JP?
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
If you were to estimate, how many people actually Pablo Escobar killed?
Yeah, Steve and I did our own analysis, and our own analysis, and we considered car bombs, we considered assassinations, we considered the police officers that were killed, innocent bystanders, and there were a lot of. We put our estimate is 10 to 15,000.
Wow.
10 to 15,000. Now, there's a guy. One of Pablo Escobar's sicarios, the only guy that really was left. His name was Popeye, very John Jairo Vasquez, and he goes by Popeye, famous because he did about 25 years. He got released about 5 years ago, and this guy had his own YouTube, had his own show, documentaries. You could see him on
suddenly a superstar.
Yeah, suddenly a superstar. But in his interview, he claimed that Pablo Escobar, according to Popeye, killed about 50,000 people at the hands of the Medellin cartel. So that shows you that viciousness that Pablo Escobar had. And by the way, and I'm going to tell you all, we don't tell too many people, but documentaries have tried before this, try to get us on the same stage with Popeye, and Steve and I said we will never talk to Popeye, associate with him. Like I said, Popeye killed innocent people, a lot of friends of ours, so we never did it. And I think about 2 months ago, Popeye, what we heard in the media, ended dying in Colombia. He's had some sort of cancer, so he's dead now.
What made those sicarios people to follow Escobar? I mean, Escobar was like a god for them, but when it came down to their personal lives, I know things changed. And we see with La Kika, an example, he cooperated with the U.S. authorities right away. Tell us more about those sicarios.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, why does anybody want to become a criminal? In this case, Pablo grew up in a poor lifestyle and then became this multi-billionaire, not millionaire, but a billionaire. And I think that, our speculation is that poor young people looked at him as a mentor, thinking, well, if he can do it, I can do it. Now, there are neighborhoods, there's stories out there about Pablo being this Robin Hood. Now, we try to dispel that rumor. He did go build clinics. He built housing. He gave away money. He gave away food. He built soccer fields. He did a lot of nice things, but nothing is done for free. There was always a payback. So as his sicarios are being killed through gun battles with the police or the military or the rival drug cartels, when he needed new recruits, where do you think he went back to? Right back to the barrios where he had invested this money. And when he would show up, they would come out, he'd hug them, he'd kiss them. They would all look at him and almost pray to him like a god. And then he'd say, my friends, I need, 100 new recruits to come and fight for Pablo, kill for Pablo, and die for Pablo. And the sad truth is maybe 300 kids would step up. And we're talking about teenagers. And then he would recruit them in. So it's there's nothing magnanimous about that at all. Javier says it best. Did Robin Hood put a bomb on a commercial airliner? No. Was he killing political? The next leading presidential candidate for Colombia? Robin Hood didn't do all that stuff. It's crazy the things that he did, but these are these legends and myths that are out there about him that just absolutely aren't true.
Right. And also, I interviewed one of the sicarios, and I'll never forget, he was 15 years old. He admitted to me he had already killed 10 police officers. Wow. When Pablo declared bounties on police officers, thousands were killed. He had already killed 10. And one thing that is always, and I just remember that interview, it'll always stayed with me. He says, I will die for Pablo. I will kill for Pablo. Pablo gave me money. I was able to take my mother out of poverty. I gave her a house. She has food. She has money. So my allegiance, I will die and kill for Pablo Escobar. And what we say is, so you multiply that attitude by 300 sicarios. So you have an army of kids wanting to kill and die for Pablo Escobar. And he said, you know what, I'm 15, I'll be dead by 20, 21 years old. So who cares? Though that's the attitude. As long as Pablo loves me, I'm good, basically.
Pablo was kind of smart in a way of getting into politics and building neighborhoods. Sebastian Markin, in an interview, mentioned that one of the biggest mistakes of his father was him joining politics. He said that he could have been alive today. What do you think about this? If he wouldn't join politics, he could have been alive today.
Well, you know what? If he would have joined politics and he wasn't a trafficker, he wasn't a killer, yeah, he could have been one of the best politicians out there, but that was not Pablo Escobar. Mm-hmm. I remember when he first he was an assistant congressman, and even back then he was trying to be the president. But even back then he was even paying other congressmen to vote for him. There was a lot of corruption, but in the end, the government of Colombia found out he was a trafficker. He got kicked out. So again, this is hindsight. Who knows? If the guy would have been a good guy, not a trafficker, a businessman, he was smart. So you got to say, yeah, he could have been a great politician. But like I said, he was not.
How did you get your informants? Because throughout the whole investigation, you had informants. Weren't you afraid that they will come after you? I mean, they will talk to you, but then they will come hunt you.
Yeah, and you got to be careful. When Steve and I talk about a lot of people with informants, you know what? And I'm going to tell you, they'll snitch for you, they'll snitch against you. You got to be careful. And there was, informants who were paid by Pablo Escobar, try to infiltrate us. There were informants that would read the newspaper and try to tell you. But the real good informants, we protected them. And and I'm not going to get into how we did it, but just that we took care of them. We protected them. Some of them we couldn't, and Pablo ended up killing some of our informants. And I'll always remember, Pablo Escobar hated informants. He will tell his sicarios, and it's documented, where he would tell them, don't just kill them, torture them. I want to find out what they have said about me, and then kill them. So he hated anybody that was an informant. We were careful. We have methods in how we protect them, but you can't protect them at all times. And like you've seen the movies, which is true. They find out, and they went after him and killed a lot of them.
He was evil. We're going back to 1991. He came down to an agreement with the Colombian government to surrender, but under his terms. And he built this La Catedral, if I'm saying it right. It looked like a mansion. What did you find out when you got to La Catedral?
We found out a lot of things. We all suspected that it was not a real prison. Mm-hmm. And like I said earlier, the very next day after he escaped is when Javier and I arrived up there with Colombian National Police, and we found out we were right. It looked like a country club. I mean, he's got a 2-room suite for himself to include a jacuzzi bathtub. I mean, there's nothing to resemble a prison whatsoever. At the beginning, at the very front of the prison, there were 2 sets of steel bars to create the illusion that this was some type of a jail. But once you got inside, it was wide open. In fact, on the back side of the prison, when you got up to the perimeter fence, there was a hole in the fence where you could just come and go as you pleased. And Pablo was building a series of cabanas and chalets on the hillside behind the prison because he had plans. I mean, he knew 5 years, in a country club setting, well, you can do that standing on your head pretty much. But his plan was, after he was released from prison, he was going to turn this into a resort because he believed that people from all over the world would pay good money to come and stay and sleep in a bed or a cabana or a chalet where Pablo Escobar had been. And you know what? The sad truth is he's right. There's a lot of sick people that would do that. It was just a joke. It was, they had parties, they had unbelievable food, they had mariachi bands come in, they had orgies. It was just ridiculous what was going on in that prison.
Right. We found a lot of photos. In fact, after he escaped, some of the wanted posters, when you see him in a blue sweater, we found that at the prison, because he left in a hurry. So he left a lot of stuff behind. And there was one set of bars, but it was just so if somebody was looking, they would see bars, but it was on the side of the prison. But yeah, it was just a facade. But like Steve said, it was a luxury apartment where he had a microwave, kitchen, and his view from when you came out of his apartment was looking at the city of Medellin. So that property was worth a lot of money.
A beautiful penthouse.
Beautiful penthouse, right?
He even had, you've probably heard of the artist Salvador Dali. He had a Salvador Dali original worth over $3 million hanging on the wall inside the prison.
Yeah, a lot
like
of
nothing.
Yeah.
Wow. I want to ask you, during your investigation, you had to follow protocols and procedures. You had a strong cooperation with the Colombian government. Have you ever felt that you could have get Pablo Escobar earlier, but you didn't? How close did you get?
We got close many times. You know what? I'll be honest. We were close. I mean, it got to the point where the coffee was still warm. And there was always 2 women, the cook and a girlfriend. And they said, yep, he heard you all coming. And remember, Colombia, when he was hiding out in the mountain areas, you got a mountain operation with helicopters, ground troops. So people would warn him. They would hear the noise, and people would help him escape. And it wasn't like I said at the beginning. There was some corruption where people would tell him, but it was just at the I call it the first search. People would hide him. They would warn him. They would help him out. And but we came close many times. Second time, as Steve can tell you, I mean, we would mount operations, and there was always we came close, but because of the environment, and if you tell somebody, all right, for example, New York City, he's in this radius of 2 blocks. Yeah, 2 blocks in New York City. You got tons of houses, buildings, apartments. Where do you locate him? So we used to hear stories. People were like, "Hey, they're coming, Pablo, coming through my house. We'll get you out. There'll be a car waiting," and so close many times, and which was very frustrating.
Did you find the money? Did you ever find money, like stacks of money?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We found. We would find money at some of the houses. I remember there was a mall, I'm not going to mention the name, in Medellin, but it was a money laundering operation for Pablo. I don't know, we found like 2 or 3 million there in boxes. So, and remember, Pablo always liked that cash coming back to Colombia. So,
well, incredible stories. Now, where were you when General Martinez received a phone call from his son saying that, hey, I found Pablo. I actually saw him at the window talking on the phone with his family. Where were you at that time?
Okay, let me go first because Steve has got the better story. Anyway, I was out of the country. I was not in Medellin. The ambassador, and I've told people that it's in the book. The ambassador ordered me to go to Miami because there was an informant who wanted to talk to me, tell me where Pablo was. I argued, tried to tell the ambassador we're on him, we're close, we knew he was in Medellin, and the ambassadors are like presidents. If they say you're out of here, or if not, I kick you out. He said you're going to Miami, so that's why, And the irony is when I see the informant, he tells me he's the one where I learned, hey, here they just killed Pablo Escobar in Medellin. So I learned it from the informant. Obviously, I came back, but I'll let Steve.
So I was at the base there in Medellin, and I could tell that something was going on in the colonel's office because his entire executive staff was rushing over to his office. And, we had, I came into a great situation because Javier had already been working with the Colombian National Police for 3 years when I got to Colombia. And he introduced me, and because he and I were partners, I was accepted. I still had to earn their respect and trust, but, it was a great situation. Well, during this 18-month manhunt, I think I was able to earn their respect. And so we had the ability to go to the colonel's office and go in and speak with him. And so I went over to the office, and he motioned for me to come in, and he's on the radio talking, and it's very quiet in there. And one of the lieutenant colonels leans over and tells me that they think they found Pablo. And, so I listened to the whole interaction where Colonel Martinez is telling him, listen, stand by, just secure the location. We're going to mount up the troops and head out your way. Well, to load up 600 people, that doesn't happen in just a matter of minutes. That takes quite a long time to get everybody mustered and on the trucks and get out there and all that. Well, the police officers that were there, his son was one of them, Lieutenant Hugo Martinez, and he's the person that actually found Pablo Escobar. It wasn't any gringo. It wasn't any American. It was Lieutenant Martinez, who was the son of Colonel Martinez. They went ahead and blew the front door off of this row house. They made entry. They had sent a couple guys around back, and we all know the story that Pablo and his lone Sicario, only had one Sicario that time. They got to the third floor, jumped out the window onto the roof of the house behind them, and tried to make an escape, and got caught in a crossfire with the Colombian National Police, and they were both killed that day.
And now a lot of rumors saying that an American sniper shot him dead. Americans were there. Tell us the real story of Pablo Escobar killing.
Well, and that's why we do our shows where we travel around the world and we speak on stage telling this story. That's what our book is about, is we want the world to know the truth. Everywhere we go, when we were police officers, we were both cops for almost 38 years each. People call you all kinds of names, and most of them aren't very good names. Well, now that we're retired and Narcos has come out and all this, people say, well, you two guys are heroes now. We're not heroes. You were two professional law enforcement officers that got to work a really big case. But in our book, that doesn't make you a hero. And that's what we want the world to know. The truth is that Pablo was killed by the Colombian National Police. How do I know that it wasn't an American sniper? Well, you know what? We had the U.S. Navy SEAL Team 6 with us. We had the U.S. Army's Delta Force with us in Colombia. We became friends with these guys. They were there for 18 months. But the day that Pablo was killed, before I went to the colonel's office, I was in their office talking to all of them. I know where they were. And I'm not taking anything away from them. We love these guys. I mean, if Javier and I would tell the world, if we're ever kidnapped, that's who we want to come and get us, because they are that good. But I also know where they were that day, and they were at the base. So there was no American sniper. There's a rumor out there that Pablo's son is trying to get the world to believe now that Pablo committed suicide. That's absolutely false. If my dad was Pablo Escobar, I might try to change his legacy also. But the solid truth is it was the Colombian National Police.
Isn't it a proud thing for the U.S. government saying that, hey, we killed Pablo Escobar? The way Colombian government said, we killed Pablo Escobar. How is this conflicting? I mean,
it's not a conflict. There's no conflict at all. The Colombian national government, Colonel Martinez and his son were the ones who located him, and it was the the HIN unit, the elite force of the search block that killed Pablo Escobar. The U.S. has never taken credit. The U.S. will never take credit. Our credit is we assisted.
Right.
We assisted the Colombian national government, and we were part of the task force. But the real heroes, like Steve has said, is the Colombian National Police.
You know what? And if you've seen the show Narcos, it shows that I was on the roof when Pablo was killed. That's not true either. That's Hollywood. I rode out after Pablo was dead with Colonel Martinez.
So you were on the roof, but right after everything was kind of done, finished.
Right. He had already been dead for probably, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes by the time I got there.
And all the famous photos that you see on the internet belong to who took those? Steve.
You did. Wow. That's so all the pictures that we see with the roof and everything that was there at the location, you took the pictures.
Yeah, and you know, the Colombian National Police had cameras, but for whatever reason, none of their cameras worked, and mine did. So that's how we ended up with all the photographs.
So how did you end up collaborating with Netflix and the Narcos? And we want to know how much truth is in this movie. Because we've seen Javier with a lot of girls and the stories.
Buddy, all that is true, of course. Come on, man. You got to believe all that, man.
You know what? That's the one part of Narcos that is true. No, we, you know what? Our whole careers after Escobar was dead, people would always come to Javier and I'd say, hey, you guys ought to write a book. You ought to do a movie. That's not what this was all about. We were doing our job is what we were doing. And we didn't want to pursue that. And so he was killed in 93 and both of us didn't retire until 2013. So 20 years later. But what happened was as we got older in our careers and we got promoted up to the highest ranks within DEA, a couple of producers approached us and kind of got us interested. We thought, well, maybe we will do something all these years later. But they both had personal agendas. They wanted to make political statements out of our story. And all we wanted to be told was the truth. So, you know, we turned them down and you get kind of disappointed because you think, well, maybe somebody is interested. And Javier and I talked about it. We said, you know what? This is so old. Nobody cares. They don't really care about Pablo Escobar anymore. When in early 2013, in February, is when a guy named Eric Newman called, and he's the creator of Narcos. When I talked to him on the phone, I turned him down on the phone, and I'm pretty sure he probably fell out of his chair because we've learned that people will sell their souls to be on television in Hollywood. So he said, listen, if I come to Washington, you know, with a couple of writers, can we just have dinner and tell you our idea? And if you say it's no, then it's no. So I had dinner with them and Javier and I did our research beforehand, and we realized that they were well-educated, successful in Hollywood, had great careers. And when I met them, our personalities clicked. So at the end of the meeting, you know, we're leaving the restaurant and Eric asked, he said, so what are you going to do? And I said, well, Javier and I'll discuss this, but I think, you know, we may want to move forward with these guys and let's see what happens. And as we're leaving, he said, one more question. He said, why are you guys so hesitant to do anything with your story? And we made it plain to Eric from the very beginning that the last thing we wanted was anybody would ever glorify somebody like Pablo Escobar, a mass murderer, you know, the world's first narco-terrorist. And Eric promised us that night that he would never do that. And in our opinion, Eric has lived up to his word 100%.
And you did a great job because before Narcos, we've seen a lot of movies about his money, about Robin Hood, and about some good parts, let's say, about Pablo. And he did a great job by putting everything down and saying who Pablo was. And tell us about Valeria Velez. Her real name is Virginia Vallejo. Did you actually meet her? Did you talk to her?
No. I mean, I know about her. She was a reporter who, you know, obviously my recollection is a little different. It's basically Pablo was using her for the press. She was, you know, so I'll because I just know that I know the story, but I know a reporter and Pablo was utilizing her.
I see. So about the truth in Narcos, everything is true what we see in there.
If you like the show, it's all true.
Yeah. Exactly.
The truth is, and when we do our stage show, we talk about this as well. Through our own analysis together, we believe that about a third of what you see is actually true. Those events happen and they're depicted correctly. The second third, well, those events happen, but they've been changed. They've been dramatized. The details have been changed to make it more action-packed or more dramatic. And then the last third is just straight out make-believe Hollywood. It shows that I was kidnapped. I was never kidnapped. That's Hollywood. It shows that Javier was passing classified information to Los Pepis. He never did that. If he did, he'd be in jail. Right? So it just shows you that the writers in Hollywood have very creative minds.
And remember, the chronology on Narcos is accurate. The time events, the bombings, assassinations. But it's a great show. And, we tell people, you know what? And when it first came out, Steve and I talked. I said, no one's going to watch it. And, man, we were wrong. All of a sudden, it was what? There's a following. People loved it. So they did a great job. And that's really why I guess we're here too, right?
And a phenomenal success all over the world.
Yeah.
In the end, I would like to be a part of your team.
Hey, there you go. Nice hat.
Thank you. And I want to listen from you a short message for Romanian people. Maybe they will be able to see you soon, because I know you guys doing a lot of tours. And about your book, as I said in the beginning of the video, I encourage them to read it. Incredible stories, and they will have the book right here on the screen.
For me, I would just say leaders are not born. That you learn to be a leader. A big part of being a leader is making mistakes, but when you make those mistakes, you own up to those mistakes and learn from them, and don't make that mistake again. Anybody can be a leader. I've taught my 4 children, you can be a leader or you can be a follower. I chose to be a leader. Javier chose to be a leader. Bogdan, you're choosing to be a leader as well. So that's what we need more of here in the world, to make sound decisions. There's nothing overly brave about Javier and I. We're 2 small town country boys that got to work a really big criminal case. That doesn't make us heroes. It just makes us somebody that had the ability to do a job at that time. We appreciate the fact that Romania, from what we can tell, is a beautiful country. We always hear great things about it. We appreciate you being fans of Narcos and of DEA Narcos, which is our little business brand. And honestly, we hope to see you guys sometime in the future. We'd love to visit Romania just to see for ourselves how beautiful it is and how nice the people are.
Yep, the pictures, the medieval history, the beautiful, like you said, countryside, the castle. We would love to go there. And also, I just want to say, you know what? And also, we tell people all over the world, the real heroes were the Colombian National Police, Colonel Martinez, his son, Lieutenant Hugo Martinez. They're the ones who found Pablo, and they're the ones who took their country back.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. And I thank you on behalf of the Romanian people. It was a great pleasure to talk to you, and hopefully I'll see you soon.
Thank you.
It's an honor for us. Thanks, Bogdan.
Hopefully we will. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.